Hi, my name is Alli Haapasalo. I'm a director from Finland, and I directed Girl Picture, film written by Ilona Ahti and Daniela Hakulinen, starring Aamu Milonov, Eleonora Kauhanen, and Linnea Leino. It's a story about three girls on 3 consecutive Fridays who are trying to figure out who they are, really trying to draw their own contours, and also trying to be together, live together, and look for connection to each other and to their inner selves.
Sitten Luts lähestyy. Kädet, vaaka, käännös. Ja alastelu. Tässä kuuluisi taputtaa. Mennään. Minne?
Don't hold back, I wanna break free. Got it singing through your body, and I'm carried by the sound. Every drum, every single beat, they were born from your body, and I'm carried by the sound. Oh, love will never break the shape we take. Oh.
Hi, welcome to the Teddy TV. My name is Zsombor Bobák, and this time we are discussing the film Girl Picture. Hi Ali, welcome to the Berlinale, welcome to the Teddy Award. It's very lovely to have you here. Can you maybe start off with just saying what was your inspiration to tell this story where all these interesting things were coming from?
Well, the original idea came from writers Daniela Hakulinen and Ilona Ahti, who approached me with a treatment already many years ago. They were really interested in exploring teenage life because that time period in our lives is so intense and so packed with emotion, and you know, everything's at stake all the time. So it's kind of like a gold mine for a filmmaker. And so they approached me, and I immediately wanted to be on board because I could tell already from the treatment that they had a very fresh take on the teenage life. And so they always knew that it was going to be 3 girls, 2 of them falling in love and 1 of them looking for pleasure. And then, well, everything else around it has changed, but the core idea stayed from the very get-go. And yeah, we just started to develop it, and it took many years to sort of find the exact right balance because it was difficult with 3 main characters and a lot of different themes to deal with. But yeah, here we are.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit about these 3 main characters and how did you approach them and how did you build up these different dynamics between them?
Sure. I guess we really started from trying to sort of capture what we thought was very sort of the key essence of teenage life. So we were problematizing that a lot, like what happens in that time period, which I have started to call liminal age, because you're kind of fluctuating between adolescence and adulthood all the time. You can be totally childish in one moment and quite mature in the next moment. And so that's kind of like the starting point. And then what does that mean for these different girls? So Rönkkö, I guess, would be the kind of girl who is sort of mirroring her experiences through other people's experiences or expectations, or how should I say, she has expectations for herself that she assumes everybody else is already doing certain things, or in her case, experiencing pleasure. You know, often I think 17-year-olds probably think that other people have figured out stuff better than they have. And the truth, of course, is that probably people are more confused. than it feels to others. And then the idea of Emma, the ice skater, was kind of to sort of deal with this idea of a person who has been very sure of their identity with a long time. You know, in my opinion, teenage years are all about figuring out your identity. But in Emma's case, because she's been a figure skater since childhood, she kind of is that person who supposedly has her identity all figured out. And there's a very clear path that nothing can get on, you know, to mess up her life plan. And then, of course, that happens. Exactly that happens to her when she falls in love with Mimmi. So it's all about how you sort of deal with that change when something very, very unexpected sort of seeps into your supposedly ready-made life and basically moves the earth under your feet. Right. And then Mimmi's story kind of delves into this idea of being a child and an adult at the same time. She's very mature. She's very intelligent, sarcastic, funny. She lives on her own at 17 years old, and she's very independent. But at the same time, as you see in the story, she kind of wants nothing more than to be held by her mother, because maybe she's been too, how should I say, too much pushing people away because she's been focusing so much on her independence. And really what we all want is connection and to feel close and cared for. And she, of course, finds that in Emma. And that sort of like makes her story with her mom also pop up, because the feelings that she has for Emma also bring the feelings about family up and front and central in her life.
Right. We see 3 spectacular performances. How did you find the 3 main actresses?
Well, I knew that this film lives and dies with its cast. You know, it's you can't hide behind plot or action or anything. It's more like a character study or a life study. So I knew that the actors are really just everything. And so I did a long and sort of slow casting process because I really needed time to think about it. We had self-tapes first, then auditions and callbacks. And in the final round, everybody also got to read the script, because I really wanted to talk about the story with them and fully sort of like have a full-on exchange that they understand the characters and can take ownership. And after those last callbacks, I was 100% sure. We didn't even need to look at those final tapes, because Linnea and Aamu and Eleonora had swept me away. They were clearly the right choices for these roles.
Amazing.
And after that, we did like a really extensive rehearsal process also. So we had a long time to really build the characters together.
I see. Femalehood and femininity are in the center of this film in many regards. Can you talk a bit about this? What was it that you wanted to project about this? Because obviously every film takes sort of a different approach and tries to formulate a different thesis, so to speak, about such topics. What was in your mind?
About femininity or girlhood?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we were, with the writers, we were a little bit frustrated with was that we felt that there isn't a huge abundance of films that would feel like stories that we could relate to as girls, as young women. I'm not a young woman anymore, but when I was a young woman, I didn't have so many films that I could feel that I could see myself on screen. And we were talking a lot about why that is and what is the representation of girls in film. Of course, that's very much related to how we see girls in real life. Girls are often looked down upon or thought as less, less important or a little bit ridiculous maybe, or, like we don't see girls so as such important people as we might see some other people in life. And we wanted to sort of make sure that we would be giving a representation of girls that was putting them front and center, where they could have their life in their own hands, you know, that they do things on their own terms. They're not defined by adults and they're not defined by boys. And they get to live a life free of any sort of dangers. We're quite used to also seeing girls as some sort of victims in films. And whereas those stories are, of course, very important to tell because we need to collectively deal with the kind of trauma that we have, I think there is room for stories where we don't just label girls as victims because we don't want to reinforce that imagery also. You know, we have to have more diversity with that story.
Yeah, that was a very interesting aspect. It was like very refreshing on the one hand to see that these girls like really exist very freely and also like free of any kind of danger or threat coming their ways. But then also this could also serve as like ground for criticism, right? That it kind of like moves away from everyday reality. How did you navigate this tension in the film?
Yeah, I guess you could say that it's a safer world than the real world is, unfortunately. But then I guess my answer to that is that, you know, what we put on the screen is, I believe it has an effect in the real world, you know, like if girls see this and they say that, you know, they don't have to always be seen through the eyes of danger or shaming or belittling or at least needing to be warned about danger, then that can be an empowering experience. And not every movie has to deal with the same topics. I think it's the same with all labels. For example, I know that trans people have, you know, big beef about how a trans person is very often victimized in film. And I think it's very important to also have stories, you know, where that certainly doesn't happen. And that was one of the things also for us that in the story of Emma and Mimmi falling in love, we are talking about two human beings' relationship story. This is not a coming out story. And whereas coming out stories are extremely important, I think it's also important that not every gay person always represents coming out. They can just be human beings in a story that we tell. Doesn't have to, you don't always represent just your sexual orientation.
Right. Let's talk a bit about this relationship between Emma and Mimmi, and also how did you approach to portray their love and portray same-sex relationship in this film?
Well, that also really comes from the sort of idea of what it is to be a teenager. So their love story really tries to tap into how difficult it is to first see who you are and then also be together with someone else. It's very difficult to compromise at a young age because you're still figuring out your own contours, you know, where do you end and the other person begins, and who are you in relation to the other? Where can you be flexible? Do you understand their emotions? You know, it's when you're 17, you're just trying to figure out everything for yourself. So you might be very, very self-absorbed. And it's very difficult, of course, to have a relationship then. And so I guess their relationship is kind of like their first learning experience of how to let someone else close to you, what kind of flexibility you need to have, how do you need to take them into consideration, and also where you defend your own feelings and your own needs. So it's all about communication in a relationship.
Yeah, it was interesting to see, and also as you already touched upon this and mentioned, that it just felt very natural. It felt like a kind of a given and an already accepted way of having like same-sex love in this world, which kind of fitted very well with this idea of these girls existing without any kind of lurking threat. Was this a conscious link that you wanted to make in the film, or did it just develop sort of organically as you have built up this safe space for these girls.
You mean that nobody makes any issue of their relationship, or?
Right, and they also, there is this one conversation between Mimmi and Rönkkö where they are even saying that, oh yeah, like, unfortunately, I'm fully heterosexual.
Yeah.
Which is really funny.
Yeah, yeah, because she's, you know, that's obviously a big miss if you're trying to look for pleasure, and so you're basically saying no to a huge amount of opportunity there.
That's right.
We did have a conversation within the writing process several years ago where we were questioning to ourselves, like, is this a non-issue to us, or do we need to have some sort of figuring out? Like in my backstory, this is Mimmi's first relationship with a woman, whereas Emma has been sure of her sexual orientation for a long time. We just said no. It felt old to us. It felt unnecessary. And it also, you know, like I said, it's not a story about that. It's a story about two people falling in love. So it was really just important for us to figure out the relationship on that level, you know, not make it about other people's expectations or how other people would see them. And we decided very early on that it's a non-issue to people around them too. And maybe this talks a lot about the bubble that we live in, you know, like here in the Helsinki area, in the filmmaking world. I think it is a non-issue, and maybe that is a, you know, very big testament to the community that we live. And I realized that this is obviously not the reality for a lot of other people. But I also hope that having it on screen, or maybe if you can see this in an environment where it's not as easy to be out so openly, maybe this can also be empowering.
Yeah, hopefully that's indeed, it can be very strong to see such representation as well. Can you talk a bit about this interesting time frame that the film uses to organize the narrative? It takes place on 3 different Fridays following, which creates a sort of a fragmentariness to the narrative, but then also this is what basically pulls the whole story together. Can you talk about this aspect of the film?
Yeah, that was a discovery that we made toward the end of the screenwriting process. I mean, not all the way to the end, but it was not always 3 Fridays. And when that discovery happened, it sort of helped us a lot with figuring out the sort of frequency that the film moves on. And what I mean by that is that Ilona and Daniela were always disinterested in making a very sort of plot-driven classic narrative where you have like something to go toward all the time and a big climax in the end, and you know, kind of forcing the study of teenage life in that classic dramatic arc. And they were much more interested in sort of exploring the everyday realities and kind of like breathing with the girls and being on their skin. And I love that we were able to pull it off, because there were certainly many commentators who were hoping for a more traditional arc, because the 3 Fridays, I think, gives us, like you said, fragmented, which to me is a very positive thing, opportunity to sort of try to really tap into the experience of teenage life and that moment in life. So it gave me a sort of porous playing field where I can spend time with the actors. I can take out all of the unnecessary stuff that might be there in a more traditional plot. I can just jump in time. I can make it abrupt, the tempo and the emotional changes, which I think is fantastic for a story about teenagers, because life is all about abrupt changes in emotion, basically. So that structure really made it work for us, and sort of allowed the, how should I say, to encapsulate the universe of teenagers, because it's a very small story, very, very small in the end, like it's a fragment. But like my editor put it when I was in the editing room, like, is this too small? Is it big enough? And he's like, come on, there's a whole universe inside that fragment.
That's
so
true.
I hope that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a bit about this visual approach that you take, like the aesthetic approach of the film. Obviously, it's very poppy, it's full of colors, it's very vibrant, which, in one way, obviously, like connects with this experience of teenagehood, which is also like such an exuberant time in every individual's life emotionally. Like where did you take your inspiration from, and how did you build up this aesthetic for the film?
Sure. We started with the whole artistic team to really break down what teenage life means to us. Once again, I'm like very sort of character-driven director, and also really always trying to pull from the main theme very dramaturgically. So we started thinking a lot about that and breaking down the characters and really trying to sort of figure out keywords to what teenage experience is. We talked about a bubble that you go into as a teenager, and that selfishness I mentioned earlier. The abrupt changes in emotion, and sort of how everything is in movement all the time. And we talked about liminal space and what that means visually. Like if you look at Mimi's apartment, she's so woke and mature and cool and so independent, but then there's this ginormous teddy bear there. So we're trying to sort of tap into that in all different aspects of filmmaking. And one of the things that became, I guess, the most defining in everything in terms of camera work and blocking and acting was that I really wanted to keep things moving all the time, because it felt like that's really what the age is all about. You're kind of in constant movement, except when you stop, then it's a special effect. And as you know, there's lots of intimate moments in this film. And so when we finally stop at those intimate moments and the people connect, then it feels more impactful when everything else has been in movement before that. And I really wanted to avoid scenes where people just come into a room, look at each other and stand next to each other and talk to each other. So they're always doing something else. And one of the big visual references for that was actually an American documentary film called All This Panic, which I highly recommend to everyone who's interested in teenage life. It's from 2015 by director Jenny Gage, and it's a gorgeous depiction of teenage girls' lives living in Brooklyn, going through high school. And it really was a great example of how you can recognize yourself in these girls, because like I said earlier, we kind of look down on girls, but there's so much wisdom, and they go through all the same questions that we all have gone through in life. And so you really fall in love with them and recognize yourself in them. And that's what we were sort of going after with our aesthetic plans.
Yeah, so the film is obviously very female driven, but as far as I know, also the whole production was very female driven. You worked with a production company that's led by females, the whole writing team, the two screenwriters who you already mentioned, then of course you as a director. Can you talk about this very female driven work environment in which the film was born?
Yeah, it was a really good experience. It was like a really nice artistic collaboration between everybody in the main positions who just really wanted to bring their A game. Like it felt like everybody felt really deeply for this film. And maybe that's tapping into this idea of together representing girls in a way that we felt was really important to do. DP, though, is Jarmo Kiuru, who is not a woman, who is a really wonderful, amazing, and soulful human being. And the same adjectives go for the editor, Samu Heikkilä, who also identifies as man. So There were two very key people who were not women, but also sound designer Anne Tolkkinen, Laura Haapakangas, who is production designer, and then costume designer Rosa Martini, and makeup and hair designer Kaisu Hölt, that were all ladies. So we had a killer team.
Exactly, and I think it's important because still the film industry is a very male dominant arena, so I think that was just very cool. At the Berlinale, this is the European premiere of the film. Internationally, you just premiered in Sundance just a few weeks ago, where the film also won an audience award. So congratulations on that. How was that? How was this feeling that, I mean, obviously it's an audience award, so clearly the film found some resonances with audiences?
You know, it was, well, I haven't premiered a film at as big of a festival as Berlinale or Sundance before. So I hadn't had the experience yet of that size audience in terms of where you know, the scope is interesting, because we just got this pouring of reactions after the film that was unusual to me, and also really amazing. That people really took it to their hearts was great. I'm not on Twitter, but my crew keeps sending me screen captures of people sending, you know, they're commenting on Twitter, and yeah, it's the, you know, you make your film for the audience. Obviously, of course, people always, we filmmakers, we think a lot about our peer comments and what the press and critics and festival programmers and everybody thinks. Of course, we think about that, but what we should be thinking about the most is that it's a film for the audience. And I didn't know what to expect, if people would understand it over the, you know, language boundaries or cultural boundaries or anything. And the fact that it resonated in the American viewers and that they chose it as their award winner is just really, well, not only is it a great honor, but it's everything in this film, you know, because we really, that was our main thing all the time, that we wanted to give this film that people would relate to. And it, you know, well, one example, a woman posted online, an American woman posted online that she feels that this is a film that she's been waiting for her whole life. And the first time that she sees her sexual experience depicted on screen the way she feels it, and it didn't feel like a movie. And to me, that was kind of like everything, you know, I don't need anything more in a way, because that's what we were trying to do. And that felt amazing.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, well, once again, congratulations for it's a really big achievement, I would say. And I wish you similar success here at the Berlinale, and then of course later on as well when the film hits cinemas in the end. So yeah, thank you very much for being here with us and for this nice talk. Yeah, all the best for the Berlinale. Thank you.
Thank you so much.